Okay, welcome to using Lantern to shed light on FHIR API deployments with Jeff Brown from MITRE Corporation. Please hold questions to the end. This is a quick session, or put them into Whova, and we'll answer as many as we can after the presentation. Thank you. Jeff.
All right, welcome everyone. Appreciate everyone showing up for this. Have plenty of slides and information to go over, so I only have 20 minutes, so let's dig right in. First of all, my name, again, is Jeff Brown, Health Standards and Interoperability Lead at MITRE Corporation. In addition to having worked at software engineering and data architecture for many, many years, over 30, currently I'm HL7 Financial Management Workgroup Co-Chair, as well as the Implementable Technology Specifications Workgroup Co-Chair. Formerly an appointed member of the HL7 Architecture Review Board, and also have certifications in FHIR CDA and RIM standards. So I want to first start out with a little overview of what Lantern is. Now, it's not a tutorial. We definitely don't have enough time for an in-depth, but I did want to hit some high points and then also get into some of the things we've learned from using Lantern. So what exactly is Lantern? It's an ONC-sponsored open source tool that MITRE has developed based on the input and the urging of ONC that helps us check and monitor endpoints that are published for FHIR. We display data about the availability and associated response time of these endpoints. We also gather information about the functionality that's supported based on the capability statement from these endpoints. And we provide visualization showing the FHIR adoption and data availability across the US. So how exactly does Lantern work? Well, there's health IT systems have to publish these lists of their endpoints. We know that from regulations. So if we ingest that within Lantern, we query those FHIR APIs to check on availability and analyze implemented capabilities. And once again, those capabilities come from the capability statement. Now, while a lot of people do understand that the one thing that a FHIR server must do is support providing a capability statement, what they sometimes don't realize or don't pay much attention to is that there's three kinds of capability statements. There's the capability kind, and that's the kind element, coded element within capability statement. That represents basically the capabilities of something like a packaged software. Then there's also the requirements, which you'll see in a lot of implementation guides that show what the requirements are, the capabilities that are required to conform to the implementation guide itself. The one that we're concerned with is the instance, which describes an actual implementation of a FHIR server. Okay, and this is what we get when we do the invoke the capabilities operation, calling metadata, and get the capability statement back. So Lantern actually gathers the information that we have from these published lists of endpoints. We combine that with the information that we get from the Chapel database as well as NPES systems. And what we do is link the FHIR APIs and products to the organizations when possible. And I underline when possible because that is extremely problematic and not a trivial task, as you'll see. And once again, this is not a full demo, but I did want to hit some of the highlights of what's available. And let me back up because what you can do is we have throughout this presentation the lantern.healthit.gov website. Anybody can go there. I would encourage everyone to take a look and see what's available and play around with it a little bit. So on the initial screen that you come to would be the dashboard where we have kind of a summary header that gives us information on the total endpoints. You see that we've basically ingested the endpoints for 2,257 different distinct endpoints. We have indexed and non-indexed, and all that really means is if we pull in a bunch into the system, a bunch of these endpoints, then they're non-indexed until the point when we actually communicate with them or try to make an attempt to communicate with them. And then, of course, you have some basic information on success and failures that you're seeing in a more broad sense. So let's zoom in on some of the information you can get here. So you have the endpoint counts by developer and FHIR version, so you can actually see what vendors and the FHIR versions and the actual count of endpoints that are available. And as typical, we'll have charts on the right-hand side, typically list box on the left, charts on the right. And this information you'll see, occasionally you'll see unknowns in the information. And that if you see unknown or unavailable or something along those lines, then what you're basically seeing is that the information was not supplied or there was no way to derive that information from what was available. So here we see a summary of the overall set of HTTP responses that we've gotten and how many are actually applicable to the different endpoints. Okay, we jump to the endpoints page. This is a list of endpoints. What you will see on most of the screens that we have is at the very top you'll have some filtering capabilities. It defaults to everything, so all FHIR versions and all developers and anything that's applicable to that particular page and the information therein. You'll also notice that I did a little bit of searching here. I typed in Baptist because I wanted to see something that was near where my home location is, Wake Forest Baptist Health. And then some of the information that you can get from this, the source name, the certified developer name, FHIR version, supported formats, but valid capability statement, whether it actually had a valid capability statement, and then some HTTP response and availability percentages. So on the capability page, we jump down to that, and you'll notice that once again we have the filtering information at the top, but we also have the ability to check for the resources. Okay, so this defaults to having all resources listed. I just went ahead and filtered it down to have these 6 to make it a little more manageable and fit better on the screen. And then you can see some of the information on the left. We have some expandable list boxes that will show us these resources, the total, like in this case, the allergy intolerance resource, 2013 are out there, and which versions. We have a DSTU2 and a couple of the release 4s of FHIR. And then of course you get your bar graph on the right hand side. Fields page, this is one of my favorites because I love seeing what information is out there in terms of supporting the particular fields that you find within a capability statement. At the top we show you all the different fields that we're checking and the associated versions of FHIR that you will find them, because some might be only in DSTU2, some might be just in R4 and so forth. We'll zoom in a little bit and we'll see the required fields in the list box at the top on the left. As you would expect, most of the numbers look like they match. You notice that status, by the way, is missing one. So somewhere someone didn't have a status field populated. And also down below are the optional fields. Okay, so these are the ones that we may see or may not see. And so you can break it down and see by version which ones you're dealing with. So obviously what you're going to see if you were to check the numbers really closely through this presentation is that by far we're dealing with DSTU2 in the US right now. So on the values page, once again, filtering information at the top, but I filtered it down to a particular field to see what endpoints are supporting that particular field. And when you select that, like I selected name, then the column changes to name and it shows you which releases of FHIR are supporting that name or that particular element. And you'll see, once again, empty and unknown down through there because we're not receiving the information. They're not being populated within the capability statement. Validations. And this is an interesting page too, because what we have here is a set of rules that we basically defined within the system. While there's just a name associated with it on the left, there is a link up here in the top center that lets you jump to see what the definitions are of those. if you so choose, so that you'll have a better feel for what these actually mean. Most of them are related to invariants that are defined. One thing else that you'll notice is something that we discovered as we were going through using the tool. I was in here one day, this was several months ago, and noticed, wow, that one rule down through there, every one of them has failed. And I started investigating a little bit more into it, and what we discovered is there was a problem with the FHIR specification. The FHIR path that was defined in the invariant was wrong. So I actually took that, and once I decided that it was definitely wrong, checked with Lloyd just to make sure that he felt the same way, and he did. And so I entered a ticket for that. So it's already been beneficial. But on these validations, one thing we can see here, I thought this was a very good example to bring up as to things that you can discover and unearth while you're playing through here. This particular rule that I've highlighted here is called the describe endpoint rule. The comment is the capability statement shall have at least one description, software, or implementation element. Okay, very common invariant on there. Well, to the right, we see a list of endpoints that failed this test. So just for fun, I take one of the endpoints, grab its capability statement, and that's it. That's the capability statement, top to bottom. And you'll see none of those sections are in existence, so we're seeing a lot of variability. Once again, I just hit a few of the high points here. If you want more information, we have references, the educational sessions that we've had online, the ONC's blog, and even the tool itself. So please feel free to go out and play with that as much as you would like. If you have any questions at all, you can always email me the information I'll have at the end of this presentation. But one thing I wanted to do also was get into the things that we've learned, the things we've discovered by actually working on this project and actually interacting with those in the community to see, what their perception is of availability of information. So this real world experience has been pretty enlightening. The first one, many of you won't be surprised by, and that's optionality has its real downside. We know FHIR is a platform specification meant to be wide open, constrained down into specific use cases by profiling, but even profiles are going to be, should be, if they're well defined, is going to be really judiciously handled in terms of its constraints. So there's going to be optionality. And an unfortunate side effect is that we find implementers tend to want to do what is the least work, and that makes sense, I guess. Time is money. But unfortunately, that doesn't provide for a lot of very good information at times. One good example is our implementations page. I've held this one back just so that you could see that of those 2,257 endpoints, not a single one providing any implementation guide information. Zero. So, that's an optional element within it. And you would think in this age of requirements and regulations and the need to provide that type of information and how valuable that can be to us, we're not seeing it. I don't have a solution for you right now. So the ONC rule, here's another one that we really need to look at for the 21st Century Cures Act. And this has to do with the information blocking. We see that a certified API developer must publish service-based URLs. I think we all know that. It also says that they further require that a certified API developer must publicly publish service-based URLs for all customers in a machine-readable format at no charge. And that in a machine-readable format is the sticking point. I think many of us have gone through that type of situation where we've seen the regulations say machine readable, and as we know, almost anything is considered machine readable. So that doesn't give us a lot of value. The intention is good, doesn't really pan out. So to me, it really ends up being a wild west of publication formats. So almost anything goes. You see 3 endpoints here, for example. One's a CSV file, one's an HTML table that we have to basically parse out, and then another is some proprietary JSON format. And of course I could come up with my own and use that. It's machine processable, so I guess it's fine. But what happens is, for each of these, you have to have your own distinct interface to communicate with it. And that's why you have the little frown faces on the clients over there, because no one's very happy about that. Obviously, this becomes exponentially more problematic. The current state of published endpoints really has ended up being that with no requirement for a publication format, it really requires that you have a specialized knowledge of each of these formats that you run into. And if you run into a new one tomorrow, you have to learn about it, have to implement that into your system. It reduces the ability to provide automation for ingesting this, so consuming it becomes more problematic, which leads to inconsistencies in information that's provided. Now, if we have a standardized publication format, once again, standards, and the logical one would be an endpoint resource, as I've named here. Well, then we have happy clients because we have common interfaces that we can use. And the problem is solved to a degree in that we at least have consistency of that particular interface. So publishing this as a bundle of endpoint resources provides that standardized and consistent format that we need, reduces the development burden for those that need to consume those published endpoints, because once you've developed it, then you have consistency in your code. Reduce the level of effort required to represent those in any endpoint directory. It's in a FHIR resource format. Now, organizations. This is the real sticky part, because as you can see, what we know about the organization information that we have available to us is that it's basically a string of text, okay? Not extremely useful and hard to really match to anything. You'll see the right column is match score. You're trying to match up information to the Chapel database or NPES or whatever it may be. Not very good, and without any additional information, we cannot fully realize the goal of monitoring all these implementations across for healthcare providers across the nation, because we have the problem of trying to match up strings that people put in willy-nilly. Difficult for patients to discover what endpoint serves their healthcare providers, and that in itself can hinder or even lead to problems accessing their electronic health information. So it's a really big problem. We've been dealing with this for quite a while, so this diagram won't look surprising to most to see a massive healthcare system exposing its endpoint, and assuming that we actually have an endpoint resource as the published format. If we can standardize on that, then it's great. We have that information pointing to that. Some really good structured information that's standard, and also gives us the information because it has a reference to the managed organization. So we can get the managed organization resource back. But what happens when there's multiple organizations that are serviced by a single endpoint? That's the sticking point. They're not the managing organization, and even if they were a group of them, we have a cardinality issue of 0 to 1 on that. It's not the right place for it anyway, but all these organizations point back to the endpoint resource, so we need to find a way to solve this problem. Come up with a couple different solutions. I've been working with FHIR infrastructure on that. One possible solution may seem pretty straightforward. You do a simple query. Get on the organization where you are saying the endpoint references back to that particular endpoint's ID. Of course, it goes through the search process and builds its little bundle and returns your FHIR bundle of organization resources. And that all seems fine. The piece that doesn't seem to get considered much is when you're doing this on scale, we don't have to have a problem that's blocking us like security. Okay, the security is necessary. Queries like this normally are very tightly secured. So the main thing is that this query itself would have to be open and publicly accessible. There's no way around that. We can't be having credentials or authentication or authorization to specific parts of a system. You can't do that when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of endpoints from different systems around the country. Another solution, just create an operation. A FHIR operation, simple enough, no input parameter necessary. It can come in, You can get endpoint orgs in this example, and very similar result. As your output parameter, you would get a FHIR bundle of organization resources. It represents everyone that points back to that endpoint. Both have their pros and cons, and we haven't landed on an exact one. We're still working with FHIR infrastructure on that, but I've had some discussions with Lloyd recently about this, and Rick Geimer as well, so I think we're in a pretty good spot. And I think I'm doing pretty well, so here's how you can reach me, both during DevDays and my MITRE organization email address, as well as even my LinkedIn profile. Did I do okay?
You did. Thank you, Jeff. I'm just going to do this one question here from Huva. Is Lantern tracking profile or IG use?
I'm glad someone actually asked that, because that's a point that I should have brought up, that what we walked through today is the current publicly available instance of Lantern. And we are getting ready to roll out some new features. Okay, one of the new features is actually incorporating profiles. Now, thankfully, we're seeing more profiles being populated within capability statement than we're seeing implementation guides, but it's still not sufficient. But we're adding some new features. I don't have a timeline right now as to when it's going to be rolled out, but it should be within the next month or so. And we're looking forward to that, because there's a lot of interface enhancements as well. But yes, profiles will be incorporated into that.
Any other questions?
Yes, I was wondering, I looked at the endpoints on Lantern, and I saw that the vast majority of them are Cerner and Epic endpoints. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Is that a coincidence, or were those just the most easy to track? Or yeah,
They're
just wondering.
They're the best. That's nice noticing that. They're the best at publishing their endpoints, and they are pretty pervasive as well. So you will see the predominant number in there are Epic and Cerner. And by the way, Epic on their own has already started, and I give them kudos for this, already started publishing their endpoints in FHIR endpoint resource bundles. So that's helping things along. Makes it pretty simple, but once again, if everyone's not doing it, then you still have the same problem.
Hi Jeff, great work on this.
Thank you.
I seem to remember from the Argonaut track that there's work going on in Argonaut for endpoint. Do you see that being coordinated into Lantern as the source endpoint resource?
Yes.
Right.
I've already had discussions with Josh because, well, Josh and Brett, because Brett wanted to touch base with me here, as a matter of fact, and we're absolutely interested in leveraging what work they're doing. It's some great work that Argonaut's put on with this branding project. I forget the official name of it, but the branding project has got a very robust set of information that's coming out of it, but it can certainly be leveraged within there, and if that becomes the standard format, then all the better. So it make life better.
Patient access brand. The mouthful. Patient access brand. Yeah, so patient access.
I should have been more careful. I didn't realize you were back there,
That's
Brett.
not getting no patient access brands, because what we were learning in Argonaut is like patients need to, like, you know, what the joke we have is like there's 100 Mercies in Wisconsin, right? And they know the logo of their Mercy, but they don't know, like, that, you know, so you got to tie the logo with the name. And so that's the work of Argonaut. And we published this back to a little mini connectathon, but as Jeff knows, it's like adoption is the next step, right? So Epic's committed to it, and Meditech was there and did some work on it, and we believe Cerner and others will follow suit, with the idea that, you know, in talking with Jeff, to make Jeff's life better and make, you know, Lantern a better, you know, an even better product. So it's a great work, Jeff.
Yeah. I need to scan the room better next time. See you're back there.
Well, we're actually over time, so unless there's a question, we can sneak in. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.